have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello. Thank you so much for listening to the Bold Moves podcast. I am the host, Mandy Bryce, and this is episode number 232. I was on Instagram a while back and somebody followed me and her handle was tattooed STD warrior, or tatted STD warrior, I believe. And I thought, wow, that's a really bold Instagram handle, just coming right out there with being a warrior regarding STDs. So I was intrigued and sent her a message and invited her to be on the show. And here she is, my chat with Jenelle Pierce.
All right. Hello, everyone. Today I am chatting with Jenelle Marie Pierce, who I found on Instagram. She followed me. I don't know how you found me, but once I clicked over to your bio, I'm like, okay, this person is bold and I need to have her on my show. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, I've been doing like social media kind of outreach, a new revamp over the last 6 to 9 months, maybe even almost a year, but 6 to 9 months anyway, meeting new friends and intentionally kind of putting myself out there in order to help other people, which is the intention, I guess, or the intent behind that intention. So now I'm being redundant, but anyways, thank you.
That's awesome. And I think it's so important to curate our feeds and really make sure that the people we're following are people that are sending the messages that we want to get and not either negativity or things that make us feel bad about ourselves. So curating a good feed and finding like-minded individuals, I think, is super important. So
that's so true. I mean, I've either hidden or just plain deleted, like not because out of malice or like because I don't like the people or care for them anymore, or wish them goodwill, but like truly I've either hidden people or deleted people, stuff like acquaintances from high school and folks like that, where it's just like, it doesn't fit my, like you said, my energy, my messaging, the work that I'm doing. And I feel like there's more value add in making friends in similar kinds of businesses and approaches and just like lifestyle approaches and ideas. And so it's very much like creating the circle and following people who also inspire me, like they always say, like, to be successful, you find the person who is most successful, who you admire, and then do what they're doing. So that's why I'm kind of curating my media that way nowadays. And because it's like we spend so much time on social media that it's very easy to read through your feed and be like angry immediately and wonder why you're wasting this time, and you get like lost down this rabbit hole, and then you end up arguing with people on social media and random stuff that doesn't serve any purpose and is not helpful. And anyway, so totally get that. Like that is my whole MO from the last 6 to 9 months and going into this year as well.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true, especially if your phone is the first thing you grab when you wake up. You'd want it to be giving you good messages and not something that you aren't even out of bed and you're already mad.
And that's happened. I tell you what, like that has happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to adult today. Like, why am I feeling right now? I haven't even had my coffee yet. It's too early for this, So, but now it is. It's like I follow people who are doing inspirational, exciting things, and I get up and I'm like, all right, this is cool. Like, yay! It was women supporting women, entrepreneurs supporting other entrepreneurs. Like, that's awesome to me. That's the kind of energy I wish that we had all the time. But I guess if you don't have it all the time, you make it that way and force it on your life.
Yes. Well, we got into a message already and it wasn't even intentional, but just talking about how we found each other, I think has already been valuable. But the show is called Bold Moves, and you wouldn't be on here if you weren't making some of your own. And like I said, when I saw your Instagram bio, it was immediately apparent to me that you were doing some bold things that perhaps shouldn't be bold, but right now, the way society is, they are. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and some of the risks that you've taken that have gotten you to where you are now?
Good question. Yeah. So I wish it wasn't seen as bold, or I get a lot of times that I'm really brave or courageous. And for me, it was out of necessity. So I am the executive director of the STD Project.com. And it's the work is, as its name suggests, about STIs and STDs. And I'm also the spokesperson for PositiveSingles.com, which is a dating site for people with STIs and STDs. Mm-hmm. So then that your audience probably is asking the question, like, does that mean she has an STI, STD? And that does. That's exactly why I do this work. I'm living with genital herpes. I've had it since I was 16 years old. So for 20 years, I'm 36 now. And yeah, I've been doing this for 7 years, running the website. It's a website, a blog, a podcast. We're on YouTube, we're all over social media and stuff. That's how we met, of course. And
Right.
yeah, so intentionally the work is to advocate for awareness, education, and acceptance. And essentially I'm like wanted to create a resource for basically what wasn't there, what I didn't find, and what I needed when I was originally diagnosed. Like what I had no idea that there were even resources similar, and there aren't very many even so to this day. So yeah, I wanted to kind of create something that would be able to help people to move through and past that and overcome a stigmatizing diagnosis way faster and sooner than I did. I've been doing it now for about 7 years, but previously, like all my formal education is in honors accountancy. So I have a BBA and an MBA in honors accountancy, and I was working for a big 4 accounting firm and then one of the Fortune 500 companies, just making buku bucks, doing really good. Like I was super successful. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back because I literally jumped right out of that and said, no, this isn't for me. Like I'm miserable. I'm working 70 hours per week and I never see my friends and family. I don't do any of my hobbies. And there, I just felt like there was something more I should be doing. And I just felt called to do it, and to do it in this kind of bold, I guess, for lack of better words, bold and audacious way. So that's now my work full time.
I love that. So you mentioned spending time with your friends and family. And before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about making sure I pronounced your name right, which was easy. But you said that you originally were going by your first and middle name, which I understand more for what you were doing, but is actually one of my kind of pet peeves on social media. As I see people that I like went to high school with, and I'm like, what are you posting that you're afraid someone sees and attributes to your name? Or but so I'm curious with your family, like, because an STD or STI is something that probably shouldn't be kept private, I guess, if you're in a relationship and are going to be active with somebody else sexually. But you have chosen to obviously be bold and make this your life's work, at least for now. How did your family react? And I guess tell me just a little bit about the sort of, I don't want to say coming out, but maybe even coming out experience.
I used to use that language. And now because of the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, and then people trying to piggyback and use those movements, co-opting the movement for their own purpose or whatever, I'm no longer using like coming out. But that's totally, I align and do a lot of support and work with the LGBT community. And before I was ever doing STI, STD advocacy and activism, I did a lot with LGBT civil rights and in equal marriage and stuff like that. So at the time, and when I first launched the STD Project, I very much called it coming out. But now, like opening up or sharing your status publicly or whatever, you can use different language too without necessarily piggybacking entirely on their movement. But anyhow, to answer your question, so some of my family was super supportive, and I did the whole okay, so it was 2012, Facebook was super big, of course, still is, but I mean, like everyone was on Facebook at that point, right? Like I got on it 2007. Instagram wasn't a big deal. Some people were on Twitter, but only the really witty folks. And even Tumblr was there, but not super popular, whatever. Like it was all very much Facebook. And so I was vague booking, which means saying like something's going to happen without telling people something's going to happen. And so I was doing this for like about 2 months while I was still working full time. I knew I wanted to launch this website. I went to Barnes and Noble. I bought every book on how to launch a website, how to make money online as a blogger, how to build a podcast, like literally every how-to book I have on my shelf still. And so I was saying on Facebook, like, oh, I'm going to do something crazy, guys. And at the same time, in like February of that year, so February, I did the Vagina Monologues with my my alma mater where I graduated college from. And I was inspired by another friend of mine who was talking about sexual abuse and her experiences, and she was very open about it, and she was using it as a way in which to like talking about it in poetry and performing and stuff like that. And so I thought, if she can talk about something that was painful and hard and traumatic for her, why can't I do that and also help other people at the same time? So that was kind of one of those very little like sparks. And then immediately I started buying these books and whatever, and vague booking, telling everybody like, okay, in about a month or so, I'm going to launch and do something crazy, and like, stay tuned, which is so annoying for people because they're like, please let me know what's going on so I don't have to keep clicking on your profile, because everybody wants to know. We're so fascinated with everybody's lives, And anyway, so then I launched the site, built the site, and then posted like, okay, here's what I'm doing, guys. Surprise, I have herpes, and now I'm going to do this for a living, and I quit my job and my career and whatever. And so that was like, I feel like, you could hear a pin drop in the interwebs, essentially. Like, a lot of, what did she just say? And no, she didn't. And is she okay? And should we call her and make sure like she's, doing all right? And is she going crazy? Has she fallen off her rocker? I mean, there was a lot of that, but then there was also, I actually expected more negativity right from the start. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I have to be prepared for all of the negative things I've heard over the course of my life to like come at me all at one time. I'm going to get into your question of like, initially I started with just my first and middle name because I wanted to use my full name, but my parents were like, if you do this and use your last name, people are going to find you. They're going to put like flaming piles of dog poop on your front door. They're going to spray paint your car. I mean, you're going to vandalized and harassed, and none of that happened. And the vast majority of people, I know, right? Seriously, I was ready for it because I thought, okay, here we go. Like, I think that this is worthwhile and valuable and very necessary work, and I'm willing to take the brunt of it if that can help at least one person, or especially if it can help handfuls of people. And I got messages right away initially, like everybody sending me inbox messages and telling me their experience and their story, people from high school who I hadn't talked to in ages. And it's like all of a sudden I realized that everybody has a similar or some sort of experience or exposure or a perspective about STIs and STDs that they want to talk about, questions, something they want to share, but nobody knows who to talk about it with because it's so stigmatized. And so I became like, my friends dubbed me the STI whisperer, like I'm the STD. And truly that is kind of what happened. And it was awesome. And then it was healing at the same time. Like, I thought by the time I did this, I was 29, and I thought I was finally in this holistic place. Like, I was successful in my career. I had an amazing relationship, a super supportive partner who I lived with, who was all on board with what I was doing. So I thought, okay, I'm ready for this. I had a great support network, friends and family around me, whatever. But even in the process of like sharing my status publicly, launching the site and starting to do this work, having all these folks share their stories and tell me their perspective and come to me has been so much more healing. Like, I feel like I've grown so much in that process too. So I've gained just as much as I've given back, if not way more, despite all of the positive messages and stuff. So yeah, so the flaming piles of dog poop never happened. The vandalism, every once in a blue moon, I get some sideways messaging, or if I write a lot for a bunch of big websites like the Washington Post and Allure and stuff like that. And so my work and things has been all over. And like, if you go to the comment section on any of these sites, if they have comments still, or you go to like their Facebook comments or whatever, you get weird things, but I don't read the comments anyways. Like, I learned early on that my energy, I'm only one person. So it serves me better to write an article, to write something on my website that's going to help multiple people all at one time, rather than arguing with each different person on the internet and trying to correct their perspective or whatever. But anyways, I digress. So yes, long story short, it wasn't negative at all, but it certainly, I think it scared the pants off of a lot of people around me for sure.
Absolutely. So one thing that over the course of this podcast and interviewing a lot of people who have quit successful careers to follow a passion and do work that they feel more called to do. One of my best friends that always listens is like, well, what's the practical part of that? So since you said you were vague booking for a couple of months and kind of dropping hints, I'm assuming that it wasn't just like a one-day dramatic out of nowhere, I quit, and that you had some sort of plan, especially since you said you read a lot. So tell me a little bit about like the practical logistics of maybe your last couple months in the accounting industry, and then your first couple as the STD, STI whisperer.
That's a really good question. And part of my inspiration, it's interesting because I can't remember, I must have had the idea. Was in the vagina monologues and had this idea stewing in the back of my head, but I wasn't really sure how that would materialize, like how I would really do it. So I do know this much. I started researching, was somebody already doing this, or was somebody already doing it in a certain way, and could I do it in a different way? And I couldn't find very many resources, if any at all. Actually, at the time, I really didn't find any. There were like one or two other people sharing their status publicly, but they were doing it in a different way than I had intended to approach it. And so there was space. There was definitely room for this kind of work, and there was an opening. There was market, I think. And I also looked on like Google and found out how to find out what people were searching for. So what search terms people were looking for, like were people actually even seeking this information? That's the other thing I needed to find out. And at the same time, when I was going to Barnes and Noble, I came across Timothy Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week. Have you heard of that?
It's behind me somewhere.
Is it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's one of my favorite, because it was like, I was like, okay, I can do this. If he's been able to do it, and there was a lot of advice in there that I used, some I scrapped, a lot of it that I didn't use necessarily, or it didn't apply to this industry or this niche. But a lot of what he talks about is finding a niche, finding a way in which, even if somebody's already talking about the same subject matter you're talking about, what is specific or unique about you in the way that you're approaching it. So for me, I'm an analytics and a logical step kind of person. So I had to figure out, was there room for this and space, and was there need for it? And then if so, how can you do it and make it sustainable? And how much of an investment would it take up front in terms of time, as well as actual physical resources? And in terms of building an online business, specifically for this, because I don't sell a product, there was very little overhead. It was, how did I want to build the actual website itself? Did I want to self-host? Did I want to pay for a professional host? And there's different tiers in terms of like traffic and stuff that you have to consider. And so I really just kind of delved into what is going to be, I wanted it to be scalable, with the intention that this is going to get big, because I very much believed in it. And I think you have to go about doing that. Like anytime you start anything that is a leap of faith, essentially, you don't really know for sure. Like you expect to land on your feet, but you're not really sure everything, all the pieces that are going to come on the way down. I think you have to believe in it. Like if you don't believe in it, then there's no point in trying, because you're going to fail right away. I mean, you're going to end up hurting yourself, or just not really achieving what you possibly can, because you're afraid. And here's the best way to describe it. So in Timothy's book, and this applies to all things. So he says everything, it has risk. And this also applies to STIs and STDs. So this is kind of cool because it parallels, but everything you do has some level of risk. And he said a lot of people don't do things, don't make big giant leaps, don't take chances, don't stop or quit a career, or change careers, or change employers, or whatever it is that they want to do, right? Whatever it is they're afraid of doing, because they think that the negative outcome is so awful and so bad. And so he suggests looking at it from a realistic perspective, like on a scale of 1 to 10. So say you're considering doing like me, quitting your job and starting a new career. On a scale of 1 to 10, if the worst case scenario happened, if your business failed, what would happen? Would you lose your job? Would your family, would it be death? And 10 would be death, like the worst possible thing that could happen to you. So some people are considering like skydiving, bungee jumping, base jumping, or something like that. So the worst case scenario actually in those instances are death, but the likelihood of that is probably very slim, depending on if you're doing it thoughtfully and whatever. But if you're taking a risk like a career leap or whatever, usually the worst case scenario is not death. So you can't even rate it a 10. So you rate your worst case scenario, knowing that in all likelihood, the worst case scenario is probably not going to happen. Your best case scenario is what? You're going to be a billionaire. You're going to be able to travel the world, never have to work again. That's your number one, right? But that's also probably not going to happen. So if you land somewhere in the middle, is that plausible and feasible? And are you are you wishing and regretting that you never did it again? You know, it's like this
Right.
continuum. And that's the idea too, when you're talking about STIs and STDs, engaging in sexual activities with partners. So it parlays into really everything we do. What's the very worst thing that could happen? Would it be totally life ending, or would it be just not desirable, not your first choice, or, you know,
Sure.
whatever. So that was the same thing that I applied with launching the STD Project. Like, am I going to die? And I was like, no, I don't have children. So, and I was renting. So I'm like, oh, I won't be able to pay rent, but I did have family that I could live with to fall back on. Not everybody has that, right? So you have
Right.
you have to weigh your resources and options and things like that. But I had family that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to
No.
lose my car, and I didn't want to move in with mom and dad. Like, my goodness, I was 29 years old. Like, that is the last thing I wanted to do. But worst case scenario for me was I'd have to move in with mom and dad. I'd lose my car. I wouldn't have a job for a while, but I still had both of my degrees. I could go right back into accounting if I wanted to. Sure, maybe I'd lost a couple of years or something, and I'd be not as high level as where I would have been if I would have stayed on that path. But would I've also been miserable on that path? Probably. So that's why I took the risk, you know? So that was
Sure.
the thought process that went through my mind anyhow.
I love that. How about the actual, like, I saved up X amount of months worth of expenses, or different things, like from the more like practical, I guess, nature?
Oh, that's really good too, because I'll be 100% forthcoming and say I didn't do that in as strategic or as pragmatic of a way as I could. So
Sure.
I was good for like the first 2 months with my bills, but then I started using credit cards because
Yeah.
the building a website, it takes at least 6 months to start building an income. Now, within about 6 months time, it paid for itself, but it
Mhm.
didn't pay for my
Right.
additional expenses, right? So it was self-sustaining, but I still needed to be able to sustain my lifestyle and, you know, pay rent and my car payment and things like that. So I did end up getting a couple of part-time jobs. So I worked at a
Okay.
pizza shop for a while. What else did I do? Oh, I've rented the house out for Airbnb for a little while. I've done that. I teach right now. I teach exercise classes at the gym. That's actually not for income benefit. Yes, I get a free gym membership and a little bit of money, but I really just enjoy that. And I don't need that anymore financially, but this is 7 years down the line. So
Yeah.
actually, and what ended up happening, and this was also a risk that I was willing to take. Like, some people will continue to work and then side hustle. So they'll do, like, you know, their full-time job and then work late nights
Mhm.
and with their side business and build that slowly in the background. And I'm not a very patient person. So I was
Right.
like, I'm jumping all in, and I'm just going to quit and like put every moment of my life into this right then and there. So I was able to build it faster. But I went into debt, and my credit got screwed up as a result, which that was on my, like, on that continuum of Timothy Ferriss's thing of like, okay, here's the things that could happen. So I was still able to pay rent and my car payment, but I went in default on a bunch of credit cards, and my student loan is in deferment and stuff like that. So financially, it wasn't actually the most strategic way in which I could have approached it.
Mhm.
Would I change it now? I don't think so. I
Right.
don't think I'd actually go backward and do it different, because I was so miserable and I didn't have the energy. I was drinking heavily, like 4 to 5 nights per week, just to, like, that was my reward for a 12-hour workday. I'd go and sit and eat popcorn at the bar, and that would be dinner plus my like 6 beers. And then I'd
Mhm.
pass out and wake up the next morning exhausted, and I'd do it
Do it
all
all
over
over
again.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't wait until Friday, and Friday I'd go out, and Saturday maybe I'd go out too. I'd feel like crap on Sunday, and I'd be depressed, and again with the cycle. So yeah, my credit is now better, but that's 7 years later, and
Mhm.
I don't own a house. I still rent, and I own a nicer house, or I rent a nicer house, and now I
Yeah.
own 2 vehicles and things like that, and I have a savings account and whatever. But it's taken time, and so I
Mhm.
definitely made some sacrifices with making the decisions the way in which and how I approached it. So I think it just depends on who you are too. I mean, I
Right.
absolutely would not say do it the way I did because yay, I'm so happy and this is great or whatever, because I don't think first of all, everybody's circumstances are different. Everyone's
Mhm.
resources are different, and not everybody's mindset works that way. And that's
Right.
okay. You know, like, I
Absolutely.
encourage everyone to take those leaps and risks if they really, really want to, so that they don't have to wonder what if. But But you definitely don't have to do it the way I did, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally also quit a day job to pursue my passions. And if I could go back and do it again, I probably would have done it a little bit differently, just without having the benefit of the experience that I have now. But I don't regret having done it the same way either. So I totally get what you're saying there. I know that you would recommend the 4-hour work week because you've referenced it and even gone into some of the detail of what Tim Ferriss teaches in it. I'm wondering what other books you would recommend. And it can be fiction books that you just maybe relax and read. It can be perhaps some of the how-to books, or it could that you were reading to figure out how you built your business, or it could be something on your area of expertise, really anything that you think our audience would enjoy or gain value.
Yeah. So I love initially when I bought those how-to books, I kind of felt stupid about it. Like, I'm smart enough to Google this. I Googled a lot too. Like, I totally Googled every last little thing. Who should I host with? And what website platform should I use? And what child theme should I use on top of that? And should I pay for this? And what's the price? And, I do that with everything I buy. Like right now we're on camera, and the ring light, like the reason I'm lit up, I probably researched that for like 3 hours before I spent the $90, and same deal with my microphone. Like, that's just how I do everything, is almost overly thorough. But, okay. So books wise, I think how-to books, if you don't know, I mean, go and grab the book, and there's no shame in starting from the very bottom. Like at that point in time, I felt a little goofy. Like, here I am buying all these how-to books. And like, I just felt, I don't know why. And now looking back at it, like, I don't know why I felt a little shameful about like having no clue and reading the dummies. It was the 4 dummies. Did I say all the 4 dummies?
No, but I was thinking about it, and I think I have.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nutrition for dummies, but that's my husband's behind me.
Yeah. I've got right now on my shelf is publishing ebooks for dummies.
All right.
So,
nice.
I'm considering either an ebook or a traditional publishing route, and I'm still volleying back and forth between that. I started a book a little while ago and then stopped and haven't finished it yet. So I digress. But so yes, I'm like, oh, I'm missing something, a component of this conversation. And the how-to books were all the 4 dummies books. I literally bought every 4 dummies book, so something about that, you feel a little cheesy or something, I guess.
Right,
at the time I did, I had like 5 in line at the checkout. Yeah. And I'm sure these people were like, oh my gosh, like you literally bought us out of all of the entrepreneurial ebooks that we have. But I mean, there is no shame in starting from the bottom, because
everyone did.
Cliche, but you can only go up. I mean, you have to start somewhere, and you learn somewhere. And like, that's hard for me now that I've been doing this for 7 years, and I've had some prestigious accolades, some awards, and like I've been published on a lot of big online sources and things like that. To do something like, I just restarted our podcast, which I'm doing a YouTube video to coincide with it. I'm awful at it. Like, my podcasts suck and my YouTube sucks. And it's not the end of the world, but it's also not great. Like, it's not very interesting. I'm not really nice and snappy and succinct and witty and cute. And I don't know, I'm not like everything that I want to be on a podcast and YouTube. But I'm like, if I, in a couple of years ago, I started it and stopped because I was kind of like embarrassed about it. I was like, man, if I can't do anything and make it be amazing, I don't want to do it at all, which is a really crappy mindset. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with saying I did this amazing, but now I'm learning something new, and now I'm going to suck at it for a little while until I figure that out. So I digress, but back to like the 4 dummies books, like I loved them. I earmarked so much in every single one of those pages. And now I'm like, they're totally dated. You want to make sure like you get a current one if you do. But anyways, so that's great. Timothy Ferriss's book is great too, especially for like an entrepreneur, anybody considering taking any kind of leap, a move, a new relationship. I mean, really, it applies to a lot of things. But he's specifically also in the 4-hour work week talks about how everybody doesn't have to fit into a linear pattern, and everyone doesn't have to fit into the same type of lifestyle. And it doesn't make sense. We can personalize everything. If we're all so darn unique and amazing individual snowflakes, then why would we all, and I used to teach college classes. That was another thing I was doing. I was teaching accounting classes at Grand Rapids Community College and at a local community college. And I would tell my students, like, if you are a linear person that follows this like prescribed path of you go to high school, you figure out what you want to do for a living, you go to college for 4 to 6 to 8 years, depending on the career. Then after you graduate from college, you get your first job, you meet the person that you're going to marry, you marry them, you buy a house with a white picket fence, you have 2.1 kids, and then you live happily ever after, living your life and working that career until you retire, and then you go and travel the world in a Winnebago. I don't know. You know, if that fits you and sounds amazing, then rock that out. Like go and do it to your very best and be proud of your life and don't feel like you have to compare yourself to anyone else. However, if you're 35 and you're like, I still don't know what the F I'm going to do and I'm miserable or I don't know how to like get out of what I'm doing or even find a new path or whatever, like that doesn't mean that you suck. That doesn't mean that you failed. Like everybody's timelines are different and they're all over the place and they don't have to all match this one like straight line. That doesn't even make sense if we're all so unique and original, you know, and then we're all going to have to follow our own paths. And it's hard. I mean, I totally get it too, because I do this as well. And this is partially why we started this conversation about cultivating our social media and the people around us and all the information that we see and that feeds through our head all day, is because it's easy to compare ourselves to somebody else who's the same age, who we graduated with. And they're like, oh, they have a house already. Like I'm 36 and I've never bought a house. And that could make me feel bad. But in some ways, I'm like, I've done other things and I really don't care, you know, like I don't care now. But at one point that was like, well, everyone's bought a house and everyone's having kids now. And I don't know. And I'm just getting more animals and out getting tattooed. I mean, literally. So, but anyway, okay. So that's my whole like elevator pitch on, you know, but it fits with your whole bold moves and everything, you know, so that's what's kind of cool about it. But anyways, I also love Hyperbole and a Half, which is by Allie Brosh. I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
Okay.
And she is a person who's dealt with anxiety and depression and social anxiety. And she takes a really awesome approach at like just like self-care, and it's humorous and endearing. And she does all of these little illustrations that I'm sure you've seen the illustrations. They're like in memes all over the place. And anyway, so that's an awesome book.
Very
That's
cool.
probably my list is I guess the 4-hour work week, Hyperbole and a Half, and all of the books for dummies. Like go for it.
Whatever you're looking for. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And I was going to say, I thought I detected a fellow Midwesterner. I thought I heard the accent.
Yes. I'm from Michigan originally. I live in North Carolina now, but I'll never be a Southern belle. Like I just don't fit into that stereotype, but I'm Midwestern all day long. I mean, that's for sure. That really is.
Very nice. I'm from the Milwaukee area originally and now in LA. So
oh, that's wonderful. Oh my gosh. So Spotted Cow, are you a beer drinker?
I'm not. That's why they kicked me out of Wisconsin.
Yep.
I make up for it in cheese consumption.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah. I should have been a Wisconsinite. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I have loved Michigan. I think I slept on it for too long. And then I went there for a 3-day breast cancer walk. And I was like, this place is beautiful. There's wine and chocolate everywhere and it's pretty. So, if you're listening and you've never been to Michigan, go in the summer. It's beautiful.
Oh, in the summer especially. If you like snow, I mean, definitely you could go now, but it is cold for a very long time. And I love snow. I love all the seasons. But yeah, in the summer it is. It's just gorgeous. It's 70 degrees and sunny and like very green, very green. And people are pretty friendly. And that's everyone's who's from Michigan. I feel like Michiganders are kind of like Texans. I mean, we're uber proud of being from Michigan. It's like the high five state, the land hand, and we can tell you on our hand where we're from, you know, all of that. I mean, I have like Michigan shaped memorabilia and things all over. My entire arm, I have a tattooed sleeve, and my entire arm is all Michigan flora and fauna. Like, people actually have Michigan tattooed, the shape of Michigan, or the outline of like the Great Lakes, which then outlines Michigan. Like, tons of people have that actually tattooed, but I even have like a Michigan sleeve too. So, like, yeah, I mean, people from Michigan are definitely, I think, similar in terms of their Michigander pride, basically.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, so I always find that people I have on, if you do one bold move, it's usually not the only one. So this could be something you haven't even brought up yet, but I'm wondering what the scariest thing you've ever done is, or the scariest thing you've ever experienced.
That's a good point, and I've never been asked that question. So I think I did a lot of small, bold moves leading up to launching the STD project. Like I went skydiving 3 times. And when you go skydiving, you can choose to either go tandem where someone's attached to you and then you get more free fall. You're jumping from a higher height, but someone else pulls the parachute and you're attached to somebody, or you can choose to jump out of the plane on your own and do static line. And then a static line means there's a string attached to the airplane and it pulls the chute for you. And then you have to do all this training like 8 hours in advance before you ever jump and get certified and whatever. So I did static line 3 times because I was considering becoming like a person who was certified to jump on their own and whatever, but it's super expensive and I didn't have the resources to continue it. And it's this whole subculture, like this like clique of people who are always like they're jumping regularly and working on their certification and they're packing their own chutes and stuff like that. So I think that would be considered by a lot of folks to be bold. I also performed in the vagina monologues right before I launched the STD project, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen the vagina monologues, but there's a specific, I did 2 different monologues. One was hair, talking about our hair in different places and locations. And then the other one was the moaner. So it was the girl who loved vaginas and loved to make women moan. And so part of the whole monologue is her moaning and telling the audience all the different ways in which that sounds and how that sounds. And it's very, you have to have a little bit of guts in order to do that too. And like come out of your shell and to really just like go all for it, because the good ones, you can Google it and see like YouTube videos of it being performed all over the place. Right. And so the moaner is like one of the favorites because it's funny and it's just so real too. And, but it's also kind of the person who's doing it usually is going all out. I mean, it's a very theatrical kind of performance. So I think that would be it. That's the ones. Oh, you know what? I also auditioned for American Idol. See, you're right. You're absolutely right. There were other things. I am not the next American Idol, turns out, but that's okay. So yeah, I mean, you're right though. Actually, I think I'd never thought about that. And I'm going to have to start asking that of people that I meet who I'm also admire and have done bold moves too, like leading up to their whatever it is that I'm aware of, because I didn't even think about that. Like one begets the other, I think. And I think that helps to like add some confidence. Like you can do it. And sometimes those bold moves can be little too, like everyday little things, having tough conversations that people don't regularly have, like to bring it full circle back to STI, STD conversations, that can be, I get questions a lot of times, like people like what I'm doing or are inspired or helped by the work that I'm doing. And they're like, how can I help? I want to advocate, but I'm so scared and I don't think I can be as public as you are. And I remind people that the way in which I'm choosing to be an advocate and an activist for others does not have to be the same way that everybody else does. I mean, you don't have to do it in the same way for it to be bold, courageous, amazing, and helpful and beneficial and awesome for your life, like, and that applies really to anything. Like you have to find your path, the way in which that, like to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and out of your comfort zone might be in my comfort zone. Or, I mean, like it doesn't, we don't have to do exactly what somebody else is doing for it to be categorized in that same way and for it to be admirable and commendable, I think.
I agree 100%. And as you're asking these people that who have made bold moves, definitely send them my way so they can share their stories with me as well and my listeners. But I always like to ask, and I'm so glad that you brought it to the level of it being defined so many different ways, that different things can be bold, and what's bold to one person might be just a normal day for another. But I would love to hear your advice on pushing past fear, whether it's when you're talking to people who want to be advocates and maybe helping them, or if you're speaking personally to someone who might be afraid to tell their partner that they have an STD or STI, or really anything. What tips do you have to kind of feel the fear and do it anyway, or to do something that's scary?
That is such a good question.
Thank you. I try.
I feel like it's not worth doing if you're not a little scared about it.
I like that.
So, I mean, almost everything else is just kind of commonplace every day, you know, brushing your hair, taking a shower. And even that sometimes, depending on who you are and what you're dealing with, that in and of itself, just getting out of bed and brushing your teeth and hair and getting in the shower might scare the crap out of you because all you want to do is lay in bed that day.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's okay to sit in the fear, to acknowledge it, and to sit in the bad feeling. So we culturally have done a really poor job of this, I think. Maybe always, but especially currently we do, and especially social media impacts this, right? Like everybody is always happy and living their best life and blessed, hashtag blessed, and everything's so great. And even I do this to some extent because I share a lot of the positive and I don't share as much negative online. So people assume that they're seeing my everyday when really they're seeing the majority of my highlight reel. Yeah. And so I think that we get afraid to have bad feelings, to especially fear and to be afraid. So instead of being afraid and doing something even through that fear, we're like, what can I do to not be afraid? What can I do to not be uncomfortable? What can I do to not be angry or sad? And sometimes it's okay to just be afraid of something, to just be sad, to just be angry. Like, I think we think that bad feelings make us bad, and bad feelings aren't bad inherently in and of themselves. It's how we approach them, what we do with them, how we handle them, how long we sit in them. And again, that also, like, I don't even have a timeline for that. I can't tell someone like you being sad for a whole day or even a whole week is bad. Like, it's just got to be on a structure of how that is impacting your life. And if you want to do something different, like sometimes it just takes actually just doing it regardless of whether it's scary or not. And knowing that part of the fear too is we're just afraid of what we don't know, and what we make up in our mind is usually way worse. Like, just like Timothy Ferris says, it's usually way worse than what the actual outcome is going to be. Now, the actual outcome might not be the absolute best case scenario. Sometimes it is, though. So that's cool, because there is that possibility, but it's very rarely the worst case scenario. It's going to fall somewhere in the middle, and you're going to learn something. And then the next time you do it, it won't be as scary. Like, one of the things that people come to me about most often, is how to tell someone that they have an STI. Like, if they were diagnosed with an STI, how are you going to tell a new partner? People are absolutely petrified of that. And it's because they're scared of rejection. But we get rejected for any manner of things all day long, all the time. Like, I just recently, I added you on Instagram. Like, I didn't know who you were. I've been doing this on Facebook too. Like, if I see somebody doing something amazing in similar line of work, and I like their messaging, and I see what their public posts are, I see what their career is and what their job title is, and I look through some of their pictures, I'll just friend request them. I was telling my brother about this the other day, and he's like, really? And I said, yeah, every once in a while I get somebody saying, how do I know you and why did you send me a friend request? And then I'll just tell them, like, to be honest, it's totally purely selfish, and I'm interested in meeting new people in this realm, and I think I might learn something from you and whatever. But if you're not comfortable accepting, like, no big deal. The majority of people don't send a message. Either people say yes or no, and I never even have to worry about it. And the yeses turn into things like these conversations that are really cool, and like, you meet new people and you connect. And so it's so worthwhile, because the no's don't even really hurt my feelings. Like, I'm not losing anything by somebody saying, like, who's that chick? Why is she friend requesting me? Like, okay, no big deal. Bye. You know, like, that it just wasn't meant to be at that time. And we forget that sometimes that it's as simple as that, and we're overcomplicating things. And I'm preaching to myself here, because like, I am 100% in my head all the time about everything, you know, like, we are not very good at being in the present. I am very much a future thinker, and even a backwards thinker, you know, like, fear is thinking too much about the future and what could be that you don't know, outcomes that you have no idea and you have no control over. And then what was the other one? Sadness or shame is about thinking about the past, right? So if you're feeling some of those things, oftentimes you're not in the current present. Sometimes the present just sucks too. And that goes back to, like, that's okay. Oh, well, then, you know, like, it won't always suck. It can't. I mean, that is just like, that is just law of, like, nature. There's some scientific law that says that things can't suck forever, you know. There's going to be some light somewhere. And I guess if you hang on in that way. And some of this is platitudes and cliche kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily help you when you're in it and you're still afraid. But you do it and you leap, and then you do it again. Like all these entrepreneurs, who else I follow who I really love? Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V.
Yeah.
Have you heard of him?
I'm familiar. I don't like the hustle porn aspect of his message, but the rest of it I enjoy.
It very much is. People either love him or hate him, and he swears a lot, so if you're not a big swear person, like, and I typically do, so I'm like, okay, yes, like good. Yeah.
Right.
But it's a little bit hustle porn. I mean, I've never heard it called that, but that's exactly it. That is.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's helpful to get you off your butt because to me, like that helps too. Like, okay, stop whining or being sad or feeling sorry for yourself and just do it, and the only reason you're not achieving is because you're not doing it and whatever. But the one thing that I don't love about his messaging, and so I cherry pick what I want to hear from him and what I just don't care. One thing that he says all the time is like, you need to be hustling 24/7, like every free minute of your day. And every once in a while he'll say like, oh, if you're happy and you want to spend time with your family and friends and you don't want to make as much money or you don't want to be as successful, then that's fine. Then that's your joy. But I'm like, no, I don't see it that way. Or the way he kind of says it, he puts more value in the people who are 24/7 hustling. And I'm like, I just don't subscribe. That's exactly why I quit what I was doing. Cause I was 24/7 hustling. I felt like, and and it was to my detriment very much so. So, I don't love that because I think you can actually be wildly successful and feel good and feel successful because it's somewhat success is just an arbitrary idea, is what we make of it.
Everyone
but I think
has a different definition.
Totally.
No, I totally agree about Gary V. And that's why decreased my consumption because I was following him on Snapchat for a while, which I don't even use Snapchat anymore, but it was exhausting because he'd have the timestamp and he would be like, okay, it's 4 a.m. and I'm getting on this plane and now I'm in a third city today. And I'm like, I know you have kids or a kid or something. And I'm like, that's not the parent that I want to be. And I don't believe that it's one or the other. I agree with you that you can have happiness and enjoy the success that you create and live a balanced life if you make the right choices with it. So, but I do agree too that you can't listen to Gary V and not get fired up. So on a day that I'm sitting on the couch and okay, I really should be doing this is when I should go to YouTube or his podcast or something and get a Gary V kick in the rear.
Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. You got to take it for what it's worth when it actually serves the right purpose and how it matches up. And I think that's what the benefit is too of not necessarily, even Timothy Ferriss. I don't love the 4-hour work week is not really possible for me. Not with the way in which I built the business. And part of it is because of who I am and how I want to be involved. And so there's some things that also with his book, it was partially the catalyst that inspired me. Like if somebody can create just essentially almost the exact opposite of what I was doing. I was working 70 hours per week and making a crap ton of money, but miserable. He's working 4 hours per week, making a crap ton of money and seems to be fairly happy about it. I mean, whatever, at least that's part of his branding and business as he's supposed to say he is. But either way, I'm like, there's gotta be I'm sure there's a medium, there's somewhere in the middle. That's basically where I'm at. I'm like, I work about 20 hours per week and maybe more. I could work more. And actually some of this is where Gary helps sometimes. Cause I'm like, I know it actually could be in a different place if I hustled a little harder, spent a little more hours building and stuff like that. But, you get what you put into it. And, but also some of what I do too is now self-sustaining and just, it's somewhat passive income as well, which was part of the structure because I wanted to be able to I wanted to go camping and kayaking and cross-country skiing like I enjoyed. And I have close friends and family and I wanted to be able to spend that time with them. And anyway, so I think you got to find the people that suit you and it's okay to scrap somebody's motivational mishmash, even my own right now, as you're listening and think nope, that's just not going to serve me. And that's okay. That person isn't who you align with and that energy isn't going to work. And then find someone who does and inspires you and go there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. We've touched a little bit on success and how there are different definitions of it. And we touched a little bit on purpose. I'm wondering if you know your purpose, and if so, if you wouldn't mind sharing it or your understanding of your purpose at this current moment, because I know that can be dynamic.
That is such a good question. Oh, I love this conversation. This is so interesting. It's different than most of the questions I get, which are very specific toward STIs and STDs, which I love answering that too. But
Sure.
it's nice to actually think a little bit more holistically as it applies to the work I'm doing. And I guess my purpose is to make it so that my purpose is to help other people do the same kind of thing I'm doing, because I don't think that there can be too many people. I don't think that there can be too many, like, I don't believe in oligopolies and monopolies. This is all my economics background and education and things like that. And I think that the more people doing, especially advocacy work and service work, that actually helps people to be unique. And that's truly my purpose, is to support uniqueness and individuality, especially as it applies to human sexuality, to remove shame from our lives all across the board, so that people can be who they are and advocate for themselves and feel empowered about that without having to feel bad about what they're asking for. And as long as things are consensual, and this is consensual, even friendship relationships that aren't necessarily intimate, right? Like it goes all across the board of like people saying yes and no and accepting yes and no's and being okay with that and comfortable with that. And if I can help empower people to feel good about the decisions that they're making, whether it's sexually or not, relationship wise or not, and just as humans as whole, as people, then that would be, I mean, to me, then that's awesome. And if that can also sustain past my lifetime, you know, like if what I'm trying to work on too, as part of with the STD project, is to make it to where I'm either going to bequest it to an organization, like maybe like Planned Parenthood I've considered, but I'd like for it to live on long past me and my story, because my story is just one story intended to help other people share theirs and to have their own experiences and to feel better about who they are. But the intention is to build something that is longer lasting than just me and me being able to sustain it and build it and keep working with it.
I love that. And I think that's fantastic. And I'm so glad that you're enjoying the conversation and questions. You mentioned that normally you get a lot of questions about what you do, and I don't want to necessarily stay away from that. But if somebody is listening and has more questions about what you do, or something you're saying resonates with them in any way, where can you be found online and on social media in case people want more of you?
Yes. So the STDproject.com is my main website. And then positivesingles.com if you're interested in looking into information about dating with an STI. I'm their spokesperson, but then I'm also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you just look up either the STD Project or Jenelle Marie Pierce, you'll be able to find me pretty easily. On Instagram, I'm tatted STD Warrior, but my name, Jenelle Marie Pierce, is on there. So if you search that, it'll be pretty easy to find. If you look at hashtags herpes, hashtags HSV, hashtags sexual health STD, like my face pops up. I'm synonymous, a little bit infamous in that way, but that's all right. That's the intention.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so funny as you said that, I just flashed to that Friends episode where Joey does the modeling gig and then becomes unknowingly the face of some, I don't remember which STD or STI it was, but you have intentionally put yourself in that position. So I'm sure you've seen the episode or at least heard about it, but yeah.
Yes. That's great. It's funny because that's the last thing that people usually want to associate with. And I'm like, sign me up. Here I am. Someone has to do it. I figure, why not be me?
Yeah, there you go. And of course, all of that information will be in the show notes so that people can access it easily. But I like to ask in case someone's driving or jogging or something and unable to get right to the show notes and wants to remember.
Cool.
Yeah. So I always also like to ask people to share any message that hasn't come up naturally in our conversation. Maybe it's a lesson that you've learned recently. If you could take out a billboard for everyone to see, what would you want it to say? Maybe something you wish you had learned long ago. Anything else of value that you want to share with our audience, I would love to hear.
Probably it would be that you are your own. I kind of said this in one way, but it's worth reiterating that you are your own best advocate. Like there are people out there who will encourage you and support you and advocate and be activists on your behalf. But only you know what's best for you, what's going to serve you, what's going to fit into your lifestyle with your resources, with your connections, and what you actually want and envision. And it's okay to not know too. It's okay to not even have that all figured out. But slowly working on that, even finding out what your no's are, even finding out what you don't want in your life, whether it is relationship or human sexuality related, or broader, if it's just lifestyle choices, what's going to serve you and what's going to fit. And it's okay to say no. I think that's the hardest thing, because I'm still working on it, but it's probably the best thing to encourage. Like it's okay to create boundaries and safe spaces, and to not always be available for everyone. Like, I don't know, there's a third of introverts out there. So I'm sure somebody listening is also going to be like, yes, that's me. And I'm an introvert, surprisingly enough. But, and what that really means is that we gather our energy from our alone time, from our personal space and our private time and quiet and things like that. Like when I'm working, and this is why this job works so well for me, is that I'm by myself at home all day long with just the animals. We have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and nobody's talking to me. I don't even have music on. Every once in a blue moon, I'll put like classical on, but nothing with words. And I mean, I'm just totally happy. I could sit in my house for days on end without even seeing people. And, you know, and my husband's an extrovert. He comes home and he turns everything on and just chit-chatty and whatever. And it always makes me laugh. Sometimes it's annoying, but it's endearing simultaneously, because
I'm in the same boat.
yes, you know, and I'm like, but that's so for me, I was always a yes person. I always had to drink in social environments because I was always doing more than I really had the energy for in terms of activities and events and socializing and parties and get-togethers and whatever. And so then that led to not healthy habits. And so I realized, like, no, I'm actually really cool with not having an activity or an event or anything, or even seeing people for 2 weeks, and then finally coming out and being like, yay, let's do something fun. And then I had my fun, and then I won't see people for 2 more weeks again. Like I don't talk on the phone. I'm a texter. I don't even know what my ringtone sounds like. It's not even on vibrate. It's always on silent. And I check my phone regularly. But it helps me to say, I'll check my phone when I know I'm available and can chat, or I want to see, you know, what's going on. But oftentimes I'm working and I'm just not available all day long. And otherwise people are constantly asking for your time and energy. And especially as a service provider, somebody who does like advocacy work, I get a lot of questions online, and I can't answer everybody individually. So I try and find ways in which that as one person, I can use my resources best. So that's how I would end this, or at least like come full circle and say, like, you choose what serves you, and don't feel bad about having to say no or having to figure out what is going to align best, and like being your own advocate. And then we'll be supportive. Like the good advocates and the good support system and networks and people out there will be like, thumbs up. Yep. Totally understand. You rock out you, and, you know, circle back and hit me up when you're ready, or, you know, when you want to keep in touch or whatever. And all my best friends get that. I mean, I sometimes don't talk to them for a month at a time, but then we get together and it's like not a beat has passed, you know, and that's, but it's taken years to cultivate those kinds of relationships and that understanding. And it took me also being able to say, like, I'm just not going to allow that. And if somebody doesn't get it, then like, bye Felicia.
Yeah, that's so important. And it definitely something that I'm also working on getting better at, is setting those boundaries, and I guess being somewhat unapologetic about those boundaries. And if you're the person who I want in my life, you'll understand. So I think that that's definitely awesome advice, and I thank you for sharing it. I have one more question, probably. Sometimes there's follow-ups, but my favorite question to ask people is, if 8-year-old Jenelle had a crystal ball and could see everything, I think you said you're 36, between 8 and 36, and then you probably know the next couple months or weeks, your foreseeable future, we'll say, you probably have a good idea, God willing, what that will be. On a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little you be to see where you are now?
Oh my gosh, what a question. I think little me would be about an 8.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 11, so 9, 10, 11. Yeah, about an 8.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I doing things in kind of a public way, out there, being bold, confident. And I'm not confident every single day, even
Right.
so, but I mean, but fairly, I have a lot more self-respect and assurance and confidence than I did in my 20s. And so, yeah, I think about an 8. There's still some more to go, but
Yeah.
I think my 8-year-old self would be a little shocked and like, oh my gosh. But also I think it would be cool. I think my 8-year-old would think it was pretty cool to see. 8-year-old me would be kind of excited.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. I'm sure there are so many people who have been positively impacted by it and are grateful that you're giving them a voice or helping them find their own. I think that's fantastic. And then thank you too for taking time today to chat with me, share your story, and hopefully inspire some other people to maybe grab a Something for Dummies book and follow their dreams.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me for this conversation. It's been a lot of fun. I'm just like so grateful. Absolutely grateful. Thank you so much, Mandy. I appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine.
I just absolutely love the conversations that I can have with different people about so many different topics, but gaining so much insight is really a blessing, and I really enjoyed that from my chat with Jenelle, and hope you felt the same exact way. Stay tuned for a challenge from Jenelle coming this Friday. You will get an automatic download or a notification if you subscribe to the podcast, so I am hoping you do so. While I'm making requests, I would also ask that you share this with anyone you think would find it entertaining or helpful or motivational or inspiring. If this can add value to anyone's life that you know, please share it with them, because I would like to spread Jenelle's message, and I would like to spread my messages of you can do crazy things if other people have done them and survived. So hopefully you hear this and are emboldened to go after whatever your crazy dream is. Now, while you're subscribing and sharing, you may as well write a review. I would absolutely love it if you did that in iTunes. My goal is to reach as many people as possible, and if I'm getting reviews on iTunes, then of course that will help Apple tell people that we're worth listening to. So if you have a moment to do that, I would really appreciate it. And it doesn't have to be a positive review. If you have some constructive criticism for me, I would love to hear that so that I can learn too. All right, thanks so much for listening. Be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.